Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this joint City Council and Planning Commissioner meeting to order. Will you all please stand with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to do roll call for the City Council, and then, Joe, if you want to do it for the Planning Commission. So I'll just go down the line. Kevin Loy.
Here.
And, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Joellen Kesty. Present. Sarah Diamond.
Present.
And Alan Henderson. Been a long day. I've been at work since 5, okay? Give me some grace. Joe Burns.
Present.
Paul Cock. Present. And Nick Lavac. I thought I saw you. Yeah, there you are. All right. Go ahead, Joe.
Commissioner Huggins? Commissioner Levine? Commissioner Bowman? Commissioner Catisi? Present. Commissioner Jasper? Commissioner Burnett here. Commissioner Simpson is absent.
Okay. Usually we do an approval of the agenda, but it looks like we just have consent agenda. I do want to add one thing to the agenda, so I'm placing in the approval of the agenda, adding information, because after we have the discussion regarding the comprehensive plan and the Planning Commission can leave, I'm asking the council to stay so we can go over some documents. So it's information that you may want to have, and I'd like for you to have it. So it'll take maybe 10 minutes max. So I'm looking for that. So I'm looking for an approval of the agenda, including adding the informational items at the end of the agenda. Do I have a motion? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So I have a motion by Councilman Henderson, seconded by Councilman Cock. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then the consent agenda, items 1 through 6. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So I have a motion by Councilman Burns, seconded by Councilwoman Diamond. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Okay, tonight we have a guest speaker. Rebecca Larson-Squinty is here. She's going to be talking about the 1590 money and the success that she has had with that. So,
The successes our team has had.
okay, fantastic.
So you probably all know what the 1590 funding is, but if you don't know what our, when we asked for the funding, what it was going to be spent on, I wanted to kind of remind everybody, because it has been a year-ish since we requested the funding.
Oh, wow, it has almost. Yeah,
The point of it was to get people off the street in the wintertime. We saw quite a few participants and families that are either living in their car during the winter times, and that is a real struggle. You can't really work on your next steps when you're freezing in a car or you're trying to run your fuel all night long to stay warm. Provide them with shelter while we connected them with services. So the idea was get them into temporary housing and then really focus on how to get them to that next step. Most of the temporary housing we gave them was a hotel space. People are more likely to work to better their circumstances when they're not in immediate crisis like being homeless in the wintertime. We were going to assist those who need it in staying in their homes, paying for utilities or anything else that they might need to stay in their homes. Assist in reducing or eliminating the barriers they face for permanent housing. One of the things that nobody pays for, that the shelters, you have to have in a shelter, is if you have a service animal or it's basically your service family, because that might be their only family. If they are not up to date on shots, they will not be in any kind of shelter, to include Family Promise, the shelters in Burlington, any of them. partnerships with other organizations, like Family Promise. We work together to, if they had a family, one of the families, timed out in their, shelters. And so we just kind of took over because they were 2 weeks away from getting permanent housing and there was this gap. So that funding was able to fill that gap and now they're in permanent housing. And that family included children, as well. Our successes in who we served, I'm gonna go through some of them, and I found out like where they are at today. We had 5 homeless veterans, 7 families with children, 2 disabled homeless seniors, 1 domestic violence survivor and their child, and one of the groups was someone that has been unhoused here for a long time, and by staying in that housing, they were able to go to community court, get some warrants kind of squashed, and they're really now thriving, and they've got all their documentation, so now they can kind of move forward with getting past all that. Some lessons we learned during this project. Current temporary shelters, hotels, motel vouchers just are not enough. Julia, do you sit on the NOFA funding for the county?
I do.
So there's I think it's mayors and county and some people with lived experience that decide where all the funding is going to go in Skagit County for shelters and hotel vouchers. And it was at $2.9 million this last year, and their requests were like 30 million. Big gap between what the need is versus how much money there is that comes in for that. Homeless families with children are the real story here. We had a higher percentage of homeless families than any other category. The time it takes to go through the process for veterans to get their benefits, I'm a veteran and I'm 100% disabled. It took me 5 years to get that funding. Well, that funding is almost $4,000 a month. So if you think about someone who's in crisis, mental health crisis, homeless, living on the street, that deserves that funding, just doesn't know how to go. It's a massive government system that's hard to get through. They don't have 5 years to get paid. They have weeks, months, and that's just not going to happen. So this helps fill that gap and get them into at least the process, and they need to get stable. People in crisis usually cannot look beyond 24 hours. You have, that's where theft might come into play. I'm not saying everybody is this. I'm not stereotyping people that are unhoused. I'm just saying when you're in crisis, you will do just about anything. And when you add winter to it, and you add nobody helping and people not wanting you because you might smell or look weird, there's big, you kind of lose your community and there's no one to help. So giving somebody a warm place, a shower, laundry, and now they can go get a job, those are real that happen during this time. One of the things we learned, costs were higher than we expected, but we did try to give all the money to our motel here. There were 2 people that needed, one who happened to be blind and could not be out in Sedro-Woolley. She needed to be by the hospital and her doctor. And then one was, his case manager was in Anacortes, so we put them out there so they didn't have to drive from Sedro-Woolley every day to Anacortes to get the support that they needed. I made that decision. We talked about it just to make sure we were very transparent of how we had to spend that money for the participant. They're not enough flexible funding. One of the nice things about this funding is it became very flexible. So when the sheriff's department calls us and says, hey, I've got an elderly woman living in her car on oxygen, then we can go and help her get in a hotel. And that person, I'm really excited to report that she's no longer on oxygen. She stayed up in Blaine because that was where she ended up, but she has housing. And Miranda, one of my staff, was like, I've never actually seen her happy, glowing, healthy, and even her dog is looking really good. So in the time that she was in that hotel, she was able to go to actual doctor's appointments, not the ER, and she was able to do the things that she needed to got him connected was he came to us first. We got him the hotel, and then he was able to connect with those statewide services. I think the lady in the van that was on oxygen, I think she was weeks from losing her life in the wintertime out, and now she's healthy, and that really makes me thank you. You guys, I mean, it's $15.90 funny what? It's just a back page for our sales tax, yet it's saving lives. It's showing that you guys trusted Helping Hands and Family Promise with that funding, knowing that we would do well with it. And I did not realize we'd actually save people's lives, but we were able to do that. We worked with Family Promise, like I said, that was a promise that we would share resources. So I did the math because I kind of like, I don't like math, but what I like to do is like 100% Dutch is like, I like to know how far my dollar goes. So the 68 people, each one of them got like $700 in that, if you think about it. I just did a presentation to the GNP Executive Board, and their funding costs about $700 per person that we're helping. And my street outreach person said, but to pay for an unhoused person, like a city, we're talking cops, sheriffs, the hospitals, is almost $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
$100,000 a year, and this helped each person about $700, and they didn't need a year, because every single one of them has stable housing. One's in Marcus Place, one moved down to Texas with family. Let's see. The one of the families, they were in an unsafe living condition. The landlord just turned off all their utilities, and because he wanted to kick them out, and that's the only way he could legally, instead of evicting, just made it an inhabitable place to live. That child was out of school because they were being bullied for hygiene, and now that child is back in school, and both parents have jobs, and they're still in kind of a temporary housing situation, but they're this close to permanent housing. There's a family of 7. They're now in Everett. They were able to connect with, there's a funding called YYA, it's for youth that are 12 to 24, and because they had 5 children in their family, they were able to get secure housing, all the deposits, everything, and really get that family into a safe living environment down in Everett. And the mom has a great job. She's now a manager at wherever she works. And so I wanted to just share that I don't know what you thought we were going to do with it, just put people in hotels for a while, but this is what we actually were able to do. And my team also wanted to thank you because it gave them somewhere to put these people. It's really hard as a street outreach person to see children living in a car. No, they didn't want to. They're not choosing this lifestyle. Freezing, and then having this really flexible money that we could just call. We just had a credit card on file at the hotel. Just do another one. And so thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I kind of did.
Okay.
For sure, you did answer part of that. So it's about $700 per person to help them out. That's really amazing. It's yeah, with all the first responder services and hospital services and everything, can definitely add up. We just had an RFI or RFP sent out, but I didn't see you apply for that. Is there a reason for it?
Was it for the building part?
Well, there's the building part, and it looked like part of that was for going to be for that kids and services.
It's just a building part. Yeah, we did get one request that was different, that's what we did that one.
Yeah.
We're waiting for the next operational one. We're not ready to do the building. I'll let that to the professionals until I fix something. But we want you guys to believe in us and know that we can spend it well. And our thoughts were always like, if we could put it back into Sedro-Woolley for sales tax again, then it's just a cycle of using this money over and over and over again.
And if I can ask you the non-related question, there was an idea that you proposed a while back of working with the seniors or people that were visiting the food bank that had a house that they were now on fixed income period. The cost of everything is rising up, so you were in discussions of doing a partnership that need and also have a need, and then bring those two together and how many.
That's literally what the food bank does, is if you have something and you can give, but you don't know how to do it, or you need something, I've always felt like we're the bridge between two, I need to give, or I need something, and that's kind of what the food bank does.
And I don't know if you know tonight's topic, but it's hot on housing, which is why I'm asking about specifically the need with housing or rooms.
Oh, yeah. We have to think about our senior population, and half of them tell me they have nobody even to give their house to, let alone, and, we have people living in houses, they're not eating, freezing, because they just can't afford a house, and where do they go? Like we talked about the cottage housing, something that someone can downgrade into is super important to think about. I like that idea when we talked about the ADUs, that little cottage piece. My mother's going through that. I can't sell my house and move into something small. It's more than what my house is worth. So, yeah, important stuff.
Can I ask you, first of all, thank you for your literally magnificent work. Our funding helped, but y'all saved those 2 lives. And so thank you very much for that. I was struck by, I wrote down a couple of details, and also children living in cars is terrible. How can they achieve anything in school? But 68 people in Sedro-Woolley were in need to get off the street in winter. Where do they go? I mean, the hotel, but in the absence of the hotel, where would they have gone? Is the shelter in Mount Vernon the only option?
Well, Family Promise has a shelter, and they have a
Oh,
winter shelter.
right.
So they don't just have the family, they also get funding from the county for winter shelters. I think First Steps has a portion of the winter shelters, but if you look on the list of how many winter shelters there are, not much, not many at all. And sometimes it might be a restriction. They might not fit the criteria of what that shelter provides. Like if you're in active recovery, being active in your process, you can't go. If you're sober, you can go, but if you're actively recovering, you may not be able to go into certain shelters. So there's a lot of times the shelter doesn't quite work. Sometimes, like Friendship House will separate the men from the wife and the child. Well, that doesn't work for all families. So it kind of depends, and there's never enough room. There's never enough. And there's nothing in East County, Caspersdale, going that way, there's nothing. So sometimes people come down to find more resources, but all the people, they were all from Sedro-Woolley.
Do public
Or homeless.
institutions like the city, like say we have a super cold snap, can open up warming areas? Does that exist in Sedro-Woolley at all?
I know, isn't it Family Promise that has the winter shelter funding?
And
It is,
that's
it is,
pretty much it, huh?
yeah. The library has
Well,
from
the
time to,
library.
especially on those extremely cold days, they'll open up.
I think I don't know if it's Department of Emergency Management or the Health Department that will put on their Facebook, here's where all those warming centers are.
Right.
But it has to be a certain temperature, and even the funding there is, anybody who does one kind of slightly regrets it, because it's very difficult to have enough employees to watch everybody so that they're safe, right? So you don't want to have issues between participants, and so you have to hire people, and that's where our funding in the nonprofit world is hard to fund staffing. That's the hard part.
And even the inverse, when I was door knocking for my campaign, I came across 2 or 3 elderly people sitting at their open door with a fan on. And, that's tough.
Yeah, we found a small one, I can't remember because Miranda does that kind of work, but there's a small fan that either the DEM will pay for, the Department of Emergency Management will, and it's meant for seniors in their homes, and you can request one. So that's the kind of thing that people don't tell people, but people like Helping Hands knows how to get their hands on that stuff.
So I have a question. First off, going back to the funding, so a lot of shelters did not get the funding this year because there just wasn't funding for it, so, because it was so greatly cut. But talk about having enough food for the requests that you're getting, because that's greatly increased, and food supply has greatly decreased because of costs. So how are you doing that?
The tough decisions I had to make were, to limit like not access, but how many times you can come to the food bank. You're allowed to go to all 6 sites from Marble Mount to Anacortes. That can be a drive, but Sedro-Woolley only 1 time. It was the 5 years during COVID that you could come as much as you needed, but we had to limit how many trips. We've had to limit how many people you can pick up for. We have a family in Oak Harbor that picks up for 10 different families in Anacortes every week. We had to limit that. We have people that come from Lake Stevens, a big population of our Russian Ukrainians in Lake Stevens, and we had to kind of like cut it down to just, y'all have to come, you can't come for everybody. And that was really a tough, hard decision. We balanced it out, so we're okay, like our stock is like doing this. We used to have 6 months worth of food in the shelf, we have about 6 weeks now. We had a Department of Commerce contract, and we were able to buy food, about $50,000 worth of food to stock up a little bit. So we kind of find it, and the state of Washington actually gave food banks, last year it was $60,000 for food, now it's $220,000. So they've redirected some money, but that's super flexible, so I could pay for fuel, the utilities, all that stuff. So Washington and our elected officials really support the food banks. What we're seeing is the federal government side is being all cut. So food stamps are being cut, so more people come to the food bank.
Right.
Our TFAP, which is the money, or it's like the government cheese that you get if everybody's been to a food bank, which it doesn't look like that anymore, but that is being cut. So Washington is kind of stepping up to fill the gap a little bit, but that's not sustainable. So we're kind of seeing the balance of like, I'm not going to cut programs. I'm going to just kind of keep it at a balance. We have had to turn away a lot of other programs like Children of the Valley, Boys and Girls Club, because they want our food to hand out to their families, and we've had to say no. We need to make sure that we're strong, and right now I don't think the participants see the change. I'm just gearing up for it. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. I know it's been rough. And thank you for sharing. Very uplifting and inspiring.
I hope so.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Hi there, I apologize for the interruption. I believe Commissioner Vicki has a question.
Yeah, first of all, amazing job. The fact that
I can't
a
see him.
life support, life preserve, so to speak, is a $700 investment. That is absolutely remarkable. And I can't say, I think everybody agrees that it's so appreciated on so many different levels. So once the life preserver comes out, you do the rescue. What happens after that? How are you guys staffed for case management? Everybody has different issues, right? We have seniors that have different things from medication versus a family of getting kids into school. How are you dealing with the actual administration of the 68, and now plenty more are probably going to come your way? Because the way the food bank is set up, this is something in addition, way outside what I think your charter is.
go like one-on-one with people for a long time, and they have up to maybe 4 clients, and that's all they do. And they do the heavy load of getting through all that. And I think what Helping Hands does really well is we give them a resource of food, we give them a resource of all these other resources, and we just navigate this massive system of social services. There's a ton of services, but which ones do you qualify for?
All right. Well, thank you.
Does that answer that?
Yeah, it's, like I said, how daunting it must be, but having the ability to navigate the red tape, so to speak, more effective manner than we say, go there,
Yeah.
instead of directing somebody specifically where to go.
Okay.
I'm just in awe.
Okay.
Anyway, thank
And I
you.
know you've been out to the food bank, so thank you.
I have, yeah, I'm trust me,
anybody
been
wants to
supporting you
come.
guys, very much so, yes.
So Joe has a,
Becky, I just want to thank you and your staff for being responsible with our funds and everything that you do for our community. You got me on the veterans with suicide. You know, my family recently lost somebody we didn't have to lose, and so thank you for being there for our community.
Well, thank you for being my board chair.
I'm honored, so thank you.
Thank you.
all right. All right. Oh, yes, Sarah, yes?
I just wanted to say thank you for all that you do. And one of the things I really appreciate about what the food bank has done is the communities you started with food, right? People came in because they had a need, and you saw a deeper need. You looked, people are coming in because they have one need, but sometimes there's something else there. And you were able to take that next step and find out what that is. And that's by building relationship. And these people are coming in, and it's very hard for a lot of people to open up and say that they're struggling or that there's something going on. And having the food bank became a resource that extended itself beyond probably what you initially anticipated it to be, right? But doing so has helped so many people in the community, and it's greatly appreciated. And the fact that you're meeting people where they are and providing them with the resources necessary, you're giving them the tools for them to pick up and use. And that in and of itself is helpful too, because by them just checking off those boxes and accomplishing those little tasks every day, make people feel accomplished. And feeling accomplished helps them to feel better about themselves and put themselves back out there to do something and to kind of get back on their feet and on their own personal level, and the confidence to get back out and into the community. And so what you're, us just being able to provide what we can for what you do is minimal, but what your staff is doing for the community and how it's expanded into what it's evolved to now, and the fact that you're able to take a step and say, hey, we're not ready for this next step, but here's all these people that can, is huge too, because you're utilizing your core resources and your strengths, and you're pointing people in the directions that they can go and get what they need. And I really appreciate that. So thank you for what you do.
Seeing us that way, 'cause that's, when I first got there,
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and Planning Commission. We hadn't intended to have this second meeting on this particular topic this year, but something's come up. We thought it would be best to inform both of you at the same time so that we can start handling this situation. I appreciate all the work that Council and Planning Commission and staff and our facet team has done on our comp plan. We thought we were getting close, and we are. But then I guess it was too soon to get too excited because there's two decisions that came out of the Growth Management Hearings Board that has caused us some concern. Over the last couple weeks, I've been sending you some information, both the Planning Commission and the City Council, a couple articles, the cases themselves, and in my weekly update as well. There's these two decisions that have come out. One is from the City of Mercer Island, and the other one is from Kitsap County. In our initial review in our planning team is that probably the Mercer Island one is probably more something we need to pay attention to than Kitsap County. I think with Kitsap County, I think our intention or our review there showed that we are doing those things. But I just want to read a couple sentences here from the Mercer Island decision regarding what the hearings board found with their comp plan. The failure to identify sufficient land for step housing. Well, I think we are working on that part. But here's where it's more specific, and that's the failure to document programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability, including funding gaps. And then the board finds that the city failed to identify sufficient land capacity for permanent housing for extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income households. The record does not show that sufficient subsidies and incentives will be in place to house the city's full allocation of these households. So it's asking for more specifics in terms of listing incentives and programs that would actually go beyond just allotting the land for additional housing, but to help find a way to incentivize the development of the housing, if you will. Working with our staff and talking with Facet, we have decided, with Facet's help, their idea was to come up with a housing toolbox, if you will, that shows the different options that the city would be able to pursue so that we can get to where we need to be. And our thinking is that, as is, probably our plan will turn out like what happened with Mercer Island. But if we go in prepared and present a plan that takes, knowing how that worked out, grab the bull by the horns and take it a little bit further to address some of those issues, that will be in a better place when we finally present this. So tonight, I've asked Donna and Matt to come present their idea for the toolbox. We're not asking for necessarily for a solution or a motion tonight. What we're asking for is some direction provided back to our team and our planning commission, who has to see this next, to pursue this toolbox, perhaps identify of those different options the ones that you think may be most workable for Sedro-Woolley. So, and then, you know, something I put in my memo here, and there's really nothing I can address. I don't know how to really address this, but I wanted to bring it up. In talking with, I happened to bump into one of our local developers and talked about this generally, and he said, you know, of course, it also depends on market conditions, and can a company come in and build the affordable housing and still have a profit for them? And that's a really good question. So, anyway, with all of that, what I'd like to do is turn this over to... Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, thank you. Yes, Nikki, are you online? I can see you. Hi. What I'd like for Nikki to do is if you could please dive a little deeper into the decisions and possible impacts, and as a result of those decisions and impacts for the city if we don't take this a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so what Tom said is completely
Thank you.
accurate.
Thank you, Nikki. Sorry, I almost forgot about you there. Okay, now I'd like to turn it over to Donna and Matt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, planning commissioners. Thanks for having us back. Wish it was under happier circumstances, but we'll get through it together with you guys. Nicole, I may lean on you as well on some of these because the little toolkit that I built has a lot of kind of shorthand and abbreviations, and if people have questions about what specifically the idea is behind this tool. When we first started meeting about this as staff, as a team, me and Donna and the city staff a couple weeks ago, when these decisions came out, we started putting our heads together and resurrecting some ideas that we had, talked about earlier in the process that didn't end up kind of making the final cut, and some additional ideas that I think are very new and interesting ideas, potential mechanisms that the city could employ to comply with these decisions. And so we came up with some ideas. Let me make sure, I think I need to type this in. 3, 9, 2, 8.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but is there slides?
That's so it's not a slide. It's a spreadsheet, which you'll all get to play with. And so the goal is to get it up on these screens so that you all can see. Woody's working on that right now. So what we did was there's a bunch of ideas that the city came up with and that we helped fill in some details on. And this is all kind of thinking about this in terms of what are some additional tools beyond what was originally contemplated in the first draft that will help us comply with these hearings board decisions and get a plan that's compliant for you all. The interesting thing about this is that which I don't think Tom or Nikki touched on, is that the guidance from the state hasn't been updated yet. So this is the first go around for all of the communities having to comply with these new rules that the state put in a couple years ago. And so the Mercer Island and the Kitsap, and there's a couple others that are less relevant, but they are the first test of some of these things that the legislature did. And what the position that puts local governments in is that you follow the guidance from the state because nobody's done it yet, and then the hearings board clarifies what they think the interpretation of the legislature should be, and that puts communities that are, if they're already done with their plan, then they have a plan that's adopted and is now out of compliance, or in the case of Sedro-Woolley and other communities that are on the 2025 deadline, you're 95% of the way to the finish line, and then this says, oh, hold on, here's a bunch of rules you didn't know you had to follow. So we had to do some creative thinking, and the reason why we came up with this toolkit idea is that we talked much earlier on in the planning process with the Planning Commission and the City Council about potential land use changes and development regulations changes, and some of the ideas you all said, yeah, we can continue thinking about this, and some of them we said we're not interested right now, and so we kind of had to navigate that. And in order to come up with some, whether it's funding mechanisms or development regulations changes or zoning changes, we wanted to look at it all in the context of what's this going to do to help get you in compliance. So we came up with this toolkit, which is basically I took the land capacity analysis that we worked on extensively with the Planning Commission, and we applied some different assumptions to the kind of the underlying math in the land capacity analysis based on a bunch of different tools. There were like 18 or 20 different ideas that we came up with as staff and refined them into this list. And then we said, which of these can we look at and say this could have a kind of a logical influence on how many units might be additional units in a particular income bracket you might create the capacity for if you made this change. So the classic example being changing the zoning on a site. If you change it from R7 to R15, you're removing some capacity from R7, but you're adding more capacity to R15. So we kind of had to model that math, but you can kind of look at the numbers and see how that works and write some equations to help you do that. And what we came up with was this spreadsheet where you can pick from among a list of tools and see what the impact, and this is all, this is all kind of speculative because, at this stage in the planning process, it's, you only really can know what your underlying data can tell you. You can't tell exactly what's going to get built on a particular site. You have no idea, right? There's no way to know that. But what you can do is kind of take the underlying numbers that we know are pretty sound for the land capacity analysis and build on them. And so what we did was we created this tool where you can take either sets of potential changes or just one change at a time and see what the change in those different income bands is in the number of units that are produced. So it's a way of looking at, looks like it's on the screen over there, but it's not up in the middle of the room. I'm not sure if it's possible to get that up in the middle of the room as well, because that's going to be pretty tough to see. It's pretty small words. Let's see, do I have access to that with this mouse? Doesn't appear so. So looks like Woody is driving from upstairs, potentially, or Thomas. There we go. The cavalry has arrived.
We're having a small technical issue with it, so we're going to do it in a kind of a slightly different way. You'll still be able to do everything you can.
Okay, thank you. The cavalry has arrived. So just to kind of walk you through what you're going to see, there's a sheet in this spreadsheet that I made where you can pick. There's the list of all the tools with checkboxes, and you can pick from among those tools to look at the impact of one of those tools on its own. Okay.
There's going to be a
Thank you.
2-second delay. So
Okay.
Just so you're aware.
Hey, it works. Thank you so much. Oh, this is laggy. You've never lived until you've had to navigate a spreadsheet with 32 tabs with a mouse with a 3-second lag on it. I feel like I'm trying to land a probe on Mars or something. It's like you move your finger and 10 seconds later something happens. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, and you'll forgive I'm sure folks will have questions about some of the names of these things because I kind of had to abbreviate them so they would fit on tabs in a spreadsheet. There's kind of several different sets of changes. So there's some fairly limited, a set of fairly limited zoning changes that there's 6 different options that we came up with working with the city. And then there's some incentive programs, so things like density bonuses or height bonuses. And then there's a bunch of other regulatory changes like reducing minimum lot size, unit lot subdivisions, cottage housing, which you are probably familiar with, and then there's also 4 different options for an MFTE program. I know we had some discussions with the Council and Planning Commission about the MFTE program earlier this year, and even though that was not pursued in the current draft of the comp plan, we felt it was, given the situation, it may be worth revisiting that program. There are also, and I'll let Nicole speak to this, there's a couple of other kind of modelable financial tools that could be really interesting that are at play here too. Do you want to do that first, or should we go through the tool first?
I can describe
Okay.
So,
Do you want the microphone?
no, I should
Okay.
be able to speak about that, yeah. So in our regulations for residential recreation areas, there is an option for developers to pay a fee in lieu of providing residential recreation areas into a Parks Reserve Fund that the city then controls expenditures out of for parks projects, maintenance, new parks, development, that sort of thing. So the idea would be something similar, that we would tie a fee in lieu of providing affordable housing, and that would be kind of tied to another affordable housing incentive. Say we say, okay, you're required to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing at this percentage of AMI below, or you have the option to pay set an amount into an affordable housing reserve fund. And that fund would then, like the council would be then able to control expenditures from that account for affordable housing projects if they're choosing. And I do. I've also looked into a construction excise tax. There's examples out of Oregon where they've implemented I think it was River, Bend River, Oregon, something like that. They've implemented a 1% construction excise tax. And this is something that it does not span all community. It's just something that developers, contractors, property owners would pay for development. Now, there would be exemptions from that, right? If you're doing small projects for moms and pops that are just doing simple improvements of their properties, they would not have to pay into this. Those that are providing affordable housing as part of their development would not need to pay into this, but generally speaking, there would be this construction excise tax. And the revenue from that tax would be paid at the time of building permit issuance and go into the same reserve fund that the city would control. Couple of ideas.
Thank you, Nicole. That's perfect. That almost gave me enough time to move this mouse up to the arrow that I need. Just a moment. So what you can see here on this screen, for those of you able to see it in person and online, this is the summary sheet of this tool that I made. And what this is kind of the place where all the different options are able to be selected and compared with your existing capacity. So that's really important because the way the plan is currently drawn after working with Planning Commission and City Council is there weren't any changes to like the zoning map, but there was some policies that were put in place to direct the city to come up with some like incentive programs, and so that didn't actually, that doesn't actually represent it in the underlying land capacity analysis because these are new things that the staff is being directed to come up with by the adoption of the comp plan. So what we wanted to do is model if you did some of these things, say you passed a cottage housing ordinance, what would the effect be? And we've arranged it by, you see in those boxes in the middle, those are different sets of policies or programs compared to the baseline. And what it shows is the income. So the first column is the income range. So this is based on the area median income, which is at the county level, and it varies by family size. So what you see here is based on a family of 4. And then that second column, AMI, that's area median income, and that's as a percentage of the median, median being the middle point. And so what the state, this is in the Growth Management Act, is that you have to plan for and accommodate housing that is affordable to the full range of the economic segments of the community. And the way that's divided up by your housing allocations that you get from the countywide planning process with Skagit County is this range. You heard these numbers before: 0 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, 100 to 120, and then 120 and above. Those are all expressed as percentages of the area median income. And then the third column there is housing need, and that is what the countywide planning policies say that you have to plan for within that income band. So you look 0 to 30%. The need during the 20-year planning period is 741 housing units within that income band, and then you see the different numbers for all those different income bands. So that's need. That's your allocation. Capacity is the next column. Yes, sure.
I just need to double check something here, so that people can see what you are saying online.
Mm. Okay. Hopefully I don't have to, if anybody if anybody online needs another explanation of that, if they weren't able to see that before, just let us know and I can try and run through it again. And now I have to try to move this mouse back over here. So the capacity is what the capacity of that change or set of changes is, and then in the next two columns after that are compared to the need and then compared to what your current zoning allows. So there's kind of two different comparisons that you can see for each tool that you look at. And if I can ever get this to scroll back up to the top where I can actually select the, oh goodness. There we go. There it is. The first, you see kind of in the middle of the screen, it says with one housing tool implemented. And to the right of that, it says select tool from dropdown. So what this allows you to do is look at, as best as we were able to model, what the impact would be on the unit capacity within that income range. So that's across all of your zones that allow housing. Each zone has a different mix of housing types allowed. And if you do this change, how does that change how much capacity there is in that income band spread across all the different zones in the community? So right now, the one that's highlighted that I'm gonna have a heck of a time changing is if you developed an MFTE program to allow like workforce housing at the Swift Center. That's just one example of one of the tools, one of the potential tools. And you see in that first box there that says with one housing tool implemented, that is comparing the potential change that would come from implementing that tool compared to what you currently have. So you look at change from existing, which is the last column of that table. That shows that if you did kind of a workforce housing MFTE program at the Swift Center, where housing is an allowed use in the core and influence areas of the sub-area, from the sub-area plan, you get 9 extra units of 0 to 30%, 24 extra units of 30 to 50%, 72 extra units of 50 to 80%, and so on and so forth. And you'll see for some of these changes, this one's an example, you end up with slightly fewer units of capacity in the higher income brackets because of changes to the assumed to the development regulations by making this change. And in this case, what that changes is a certain percentage of like duplexes and triplexes are assumed to be going to be rented by families kind of making moderate income, not low income. And if you do an MFTE program to incentivize lower income units, more of those units will be produced and potentially fewer as a, in comparison, fewer higher income units produced. So you'll see in some cases, all the numbers go up. In some cases, some of the numbers go up, some of the numbers go down. It really depends on the tool because each tool does a different thing. The MFTE program is a way of incentivizing, using a financial tool to incentivize construction of housing at particular income levels, which is very useful when you're trying to hit a particular target, but it can also, there's only so much growth to go around, there's only so many housing units that are going to be built, and if you're going to be building more affordable units in a particular area, there's going to be fewer of those units available to people making sort of median income or above. And so that's why you'll see some positive and some negative numbers. Now, if we change which tool we're looking at, right now I'll try to use this mouse. Okay, yeah, that'd be great, Thomas. If you could click on that select tool from dropdown. Let's scroll up to like cottage housing, which is just underneath the rezones. That produces more units. So this one doesn't necessarily result in a net gain of any units, but what it does is kind of rebalance the units in, especially like the R7 and R15 zones. It rebalances the units away from the upper income ranges and toward those middle income ranges. So the 50 to 80 and the 80 to 100% of area median sees a bump because those are primarily the types of the income levels that would be looking to move into a cottage, and fewer detached single family homes that would be affordable more to people making above the median. So that's kind of how that works. Now, if you scroll a little bit over to the right, Thomas, just a little bit, yeah, not quite that far. That's my attempt at upper level math. A little bit more to the left. Okay, right there, perfect. So I also have the ability in here for you to look at different combinations of tools by selecting them with these checkboxes. And so what I've done is underneath that first box where it says with one housing tool implemented, I've got several different groupings of these tools that if you check them all, it'll show you the performance of that relative to the baseline. And so, for example, that one kind of in the middle left of the screen there says with all rezones. So everybody here has been handed a copy of a map that shows some marked up areas, and I think they're numbered. Yes, so they're numbered options 1 through option 6, and those are the same as what's on the screen here: rezone 1, rezone 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So while we can look at each one of those individually in that first box by selecting from the drop-down, we can also select a bunch of different ones further to the right where it says select multiple, and you see there's a bunch of boxes checked on the screen. So if you check all 6 of them, and they're all checked right now, so if you look at all 6 rezones together, so that's the creation, that includes the creation of a new R10 zone that's kind of halfway between R7 and R15, and there's a couple different rezones that involve R7 going to areas of R7 going to R15, an area of R5 going to R7, an area of R7 going to R15, an area of R7 going to Central Business District, and the change from transitional mixed commercial overlay to the Makers District. So those are all different kind of zoning map changes. If you do all of those things together, that box in the left middle of the screen that says with all rezones, that shows that you look at that, and so there's 160 new units above and beyond current capacity for 30 to 50% AMI. Only a few in the 0 to 30. That range is hard to build for reasons that I think you'll probably all have increased appreciation of after the presentation about the food bank. Those people tend to need a lot of services, and it's expensive. It requires heavy incentives to build that income level. So you'll see that in a lot of cases, that number still stays pretty high, that deficit of 0 to 30. But if you do all these rezones, for example, you go, oh, we're actually within striking distance on the 30 to 50. That's interesting. And we're basically at what we need for 50 to 80. Where it's 10 units off, which is, I think, kind of a rounding error. So this is just one of the examples of the sets of changes you can look at. If you scroll down, there's several other sets that I modeled as well, and we can always, since we're talking about looking for direction from you all tonight, if there's other combinations of things that people want to see, we can go ahead and model that. The other options include, so if you look at just the density incentives. So we talked about like a density incentive for the PRDs and then a height incentive for multifamily in zones where it's not already maxed out. So we didn't include CBD or UVMU because that's as high as your fire apparatus can reach already, so we can't do a height bonus. But for the other zones that allow multifamily, we said you could potentially, what if you got a height bonus for having affordable units that are affordable to a certain range? So with those two options, you look at the changes there, you've got in that 50 to 80% AMI, so this is with inclusionary zoning or affordability bonuses, you actually have a surplus now of 50 to 80%, which is interesting. Also, large surpluses in the sort of moderate income band as well, mostly because that's primarily for their PRDs, that's primarily the housing types that are being created. But you are making significant progress on all of those. You see the change from existing for those two options alone is hundreds of new units of capacity, many of which are focused in that 50 to 80 and 30 to 50% AMI, which is definitely meaningful progress. Other sets that I modeled include the required development regulations changes. So as you may know, there's some changes to state law that you'll have to do regardless of what you do with your zoning map. So the state says you have to do your ADU, accessory dwelling unit changes, to allow up to two ADUs on every lot. And you also have to develop regulations for unit lot subdivisions, which are basically like attached single family. So it's townhomes, but you own the land. And so you have to develop code that allows that. So if you did those two things together, what do you get? You see the changes there. So you see this is complicated because so many of these things interact, right? So if you have a density incentive and zoning map changes, that's going to affect both the underlying capacity as well as the types of units that might get built as a result of this change. So there's a bunch of different kind of things going on behind the scenes here and what I modeled. I do have a tab at the end of this sheet that lists all the assumptions for these different tools, and I think that this is something that I'm sure the Planning Commission will dig into once we get some direction about kind of, what, if any, sets of these changes we want to take a closer look at. But this is a tool that I made to help inform the discussion with the council and with the Planning Commission. So in light of having to do more and show more work to close the gap beyond just having the physical capacity, which is the main implication of this hearings board decision, what are some tools? What do those tools do for you? And then we leave it in your capable hands to help give us direction on what we should take a closer look at. Tom, do you want to add anything else, or anything else you want me to see on the tool, or do you think we just open it up? I'll turn it back over to you.
I think we should open it up. I think what you just said there about taking a look at some of the tools, which ones you think are appropriate for the community, and which ones you want us to focus on. So just a reminder to the process after tonight, we'll take this back to the Planning Commission, and talk about this more at the Planning Commission, and hopefully from that then come back to council with a recommendation on this and the plan. Somewhere there we've got to have an open house, figure this part out, and a public hearing with the Planning Commission, so we have a ways to go yet. Hopefully not many more months to go. Anyway, thank you for that.
I have a comment, I do have some questions, and I'll save for a little bit later on. Great job on this tool. That must have taken you a long time to put together and to write all the formulas and everything you did for that. It's definitely a good job.
Thank you.
It's a great tool for us. I mean, it would have been nice to have years ago to be able to see how things all come together. If we could put that with an interactive map, that would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, great job. That's outside of other questions. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
I did have a question, maybe for you or for Nikki. Since the Growth Management Board has moved the goalposts, are they giving cities like Sedro-Woolley more time to come to deal with this?
That is an excellent question. So, Tom, I know you've reached out to Commerce, and there's dozens of other cities that have as well, because many are in your shoes, where you're near the finish line and then the goalposts moved. Some have actually already gotten their plan adopted, and so there's kind of two different questions. It's for them, it's like, what do we do with our adopted plan? And then for the ones in your position, it's, you know, are there more resources or more time available to us? And from what I understand, Tom, the answer is basically, give us a second, we're working on it.
Any direction to the cities and the counties on this. I think I interpret that, they are as also concerned about this as well, and they're prepared for it.
And Nikki might have, she's on screen again, she might have some thoughts on that.
I was just gonna say with some of the decisions that, the two decisions that did come out, the hearing board gave them dates that they have to be in compliance for. I think Captain's example was February, and I think Mercer Island was in July. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the one we want.
I think for Mercer Island, they have a deadline for 2026.
Oh, yeah, like July.
I think both are 2026, right, February,
Yeah.
July.
February and July of 2026.
Yeah.
What about the Swift Center? We're allowed to use that even though it's county property? For
So we have a sub-area plan for the Swift Center, and it does allow specialty housing within the core and the influence areas. That's been in the sub-area plan since its adoption. We spoke with the port, and they are open to exploring options within the 0 to 80 range of AMI out there. They're kind of taking it back to their own people and kind of discussing to what extent they would be willing to do something like that. But the discussion kind of went around that those buildings do lend themselves to kind of a co-housing situation or new construction out there, whatever. Specialty housing was purposely put in that plan as a flexible concept, right? So that was kind of what the conversation started from, like what did the port really envision for that? Because what we see now is like job corps dorms are housing job corps students, right? Is it meant to be something that's more tied to a specific permitted use or ancillary to that, or can that be branched out more? They seem open to branching it out more, so it's interesting.
Would you help me understand, some of the things are your 25,000 on less, what we have to comply by, and Mercer Island is 25, over 25,000, kids has 275, but we're only 13. Do we fall under the category that this is, we have to do this?
Yes, and Nikki can always jump in if I misspeak, since I'm not the attorney, but I do know growth management, and there are some aspects of the GMA that are population dependent. So, for example, the requirement to do the middle housing law, which was passed, I think, 2 years ago, that's only cities over a certain size, and you're nowhere near that, so you don't have to comply with that. But all communities that are fully planning, which includes Sedro-Woolley and every other city in Skagit County, have to meet the core requirements of the housing element, which is this planning for income, planning by income band. So yes, you're under no obligation to prove that units get built at specific income levels, because that's kind of impossible. That's out of your control. But when they talked about having the tools, like whether it's financial incentives or whatever funding, or closing those gaps between just the zoning map, what number of units are allowed, and in particular income bands. That's what the hearing board decision really means, is that you can't just say, oh, we allow apartments, and apartments we think are affordable. You have to say, okay, but how affordable are apartments really? And we've done all the analysis for like the housing needs assessment and all the data on the income bands. And like many communities, Sedro-Woolley is in a position where the apartments that are getting built, unless they are subsidized, are not affordable to people making certainly under 50%, households making under 50% AMI. And so the question is then, like, what do you do to close that gap? And you don't have to, as far as I know, this hasn't been tested in the hearings board yet, but like, you know, are you obligated to show the math that every single one of those units is accounted for with every dollar potentially that's captured in some sort of tool? I think it's more the, do you have tools and dollars and incentives that are targeted at specific income bands in a roughly proportional way to close the gap that you have? And the gap is, every community has that. Almost every community in the state that has to fully plan has a gap for 0 to 50 and especially 0 to 30% AMI, because that is the hardest to build for because it requires such a deep incentive. So yeah, yes, you are required.
Two things. First of all, the tie back to the case comes from RCW 3670A, the definition section, 030 sub 4, that says plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population, which is applicable across the board to fully planned communities. Second of all, to Matt's point, I will respectfully disagree to an extent. I think that the next step is actually going to be that you have to show that you have actually successfully gotten these housing units in place, because there are review periods that are built in, and I know that at least King County has said, show that you are making this progress, or we're going to take over. I don't know what that means, and I certainly don't like it, but I think the next step is going to be, you need to show us that you've actually made progress on these housing units that you have to plan for and accommodate.
That's a great point, Nikki. I think that 5-year check-in, which is also a relatively new change for the GMA, obviously nobody's gotten there yet because the first plans were just adopted 8 or 9 months ago under this new set of laws. But I wouldn't be surprised if either the hearings board or the legislature clarifies what is expected at that 5-year check-in, and that may include, I think Nikki's right, that may include show us your progress on income band. It very well could.
Yeah, and to circle back on Commerce, I think the reason Commerce hasn't said anything to our city is because it is trying to figure out what it does about all of the bigger counties that had to update their plans in 2024, right? But the ones that came before you all, they're now saying, well, what do we do about these? And so I think they're probably genuinely trying to figure out how they address all of these plans that may now be technically non-compliant.
Now, they're outside the appeal window, but that doesn't mean that they can't be challenged otherwise, right? So, there's other avenues of challenge beside the hearings board.
So Joe Fatisi has his hand raised.
Commissioner Fatisi.
Yeah, just, first of all, that was a good job on putting the different formulas and how we potentially calculate its way out. But the reality is density does not translate into affordability. There's so many other factors, interest rates, all kinds of things I'm not going to get into. However, when I look through your rezone 1 through 7, there is no way that we have the ability right now to do something so massive, have public hearings, and a whole bunch of things between now and the end of the year. So we need to have some type of mechanism to be compliant by the end of 2025, to get our comp plan filed in compliance, but not at that level. We just don't have the time to do it. Even if we started at the beginning of the year with the facts that we have now with that spreadsheet, it'll be tough. We're still working on cottage housing. That doesn't necessarily need to be part of the comp plan. We've made changes to our zoning code in between different periods because we need to get it right. But this particular point that we have a 2025 filing coming up, and Nikki, this is a question for you as well. What do we need to be in compliance, number one? Do I see somebody going down to the GMA hearing board and saying, hey, Sedro-Woolley, you don't have this right, I'm going to challenge this, whatever. I'm just saying, any rezones to accommodate now income bands, as well as identifying zones to be brownstones or whatever. And again, they did a really good job of being able to model that kind of stuff. It's just right now, we're going into October, people, we start public hearings on different things. We don't have the ability at this point, I don't believe, unless somebody else can come up with something else. And at times, we were getting together a couple times a month, which I'm fine with doing 2 or 3 times a month. But still, this is pretty massive stuff. The public absolutely gets an input on this with public hearings. So I'm just saying, the process, the way it's defined, to accommodate that level of inclusion at this particular point, there's gotta be something that's done. And I'm just throwing it out there, a little bit of time. I think this is pretty smart. Come up with something. But also, I don't wanna shoot from the hip where we get it wrong. Thank you.
Does Nikki want to, Nikki, do you want to comment on that? I believe he did have a question.
I'm not certain that I can answer that, fully, because from my perspective, again, it is a change in the way this thing is played, and it is a last minute change, but it is also, something that says that if we aren't compliant, then we're going to have people like knocking on our door and appealing our comp plan with the risk management hearing board, essentially, right? And so we're trying to figure out how to accommodate what we need to accommodate and, do it in a timeframe that is unfortunately pretty short. I can't tell you that it's without risk not to try and accomplish what the hearing examiner's decision says we need to accomplish.
I would do
And that would probably be this challenge. I mean, I've worked with PGYs on other projects in Sonoma County. I don't think they have their eyes set on the city of Sedro-Woolley. So again, getting it right would be the most important thing. And then what would be challenged in front of the GMA saying that we're not compliant? I think a lot of the things that we already have in place are pretty good going towards the finish line. And now looking at income band specific, where, these are private properties and, you can mess with densities and things like that, but that doesn't necessarily translate into the affordability side of the equation. Every 1% in an interest rate up or down, that affects 11% of affordability. So there's factors that we do not have in, the spreadsheet math. You did a good job, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is, when we set static numbers of AMIs at different percentage levels of how you put something in code, and city mandates on private property, okay, even though, okay, well, you can do this density, whatever that model turns out to be, it doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to head down to the road management hearing board and say, well, gee, we just don't know what would come up. And it happened in Snohomish County on the UGA expansion. So somebody in Everett just decided that the whole entire Snohomish County comp plan was flawed. Guess what? That got thrown out. There were no specifics. So let's not look at worst case. Let's take a look at what we have that's effective, that's tangible, that we've already run solid numbers on. Why don't we start from there with basically what we could before we start getting, going over our skis, so to speak, work with what we have and see how we can modify what we have to do to comply with that. Look at this point. Because like I said, we don't have an unlimited amount of time. And yes, this is a curveball. I get it. But we can hit curveballs.
Okay, Councilman LaFontaine?
Thank you. I think I'm on the same line of thought as Commissioner Joe there. I was wondering if it's possible we stagger any rezone that is thought about and say in the comp plan, in 2 years, we plan to do this, in 4 years. So it's not just open wide and then we just see like, well, now that everything's rezoned, all these permits go in for all this stuff and then the next 2 years, it's all done. Because there's a lot of need and there's a lot of developers at the doorstep that would, if opportunities arise, would probably take up on it. So is it possible to add a staggering rezone into the comp plan since it's a 20-year comp plan? The other thing is that in the RFPs that we received for, helping with affordable housing in the 60% below bubbles, then depending on how much they get, but that's about the general cost for about 3 of them. And they can increase that if funds were to increase, and it decreases if funds decrease. So 68 homes, and then you look at, you're getting 3 with government subsidies to put into that 60%. How is this even affordable? Like, to grow at that rate and meet all of those benchmarks? I don't see how, like, and we can't just tax all the developers to say, if you're building, just give us extra money, and then we can take that and put that towards this action. I mean, that's just, it's stealing is what it is. So I don't know how we meet these goals. It doesn't, it's not logical, but if we were to stagger, that's, the only thing I kind of think about.
That's one of the things that's actually addressed in the North Island, decision. So your, comprehensive plan and the development regs that implement your comprehensive plan, and identify what incentive or programs you're going to utilize to get yourself to those income bands, they have to be done at the same time, because one of the things North Island argued is that they didn't have to, show their work essentially and put those development regs in place until that 5-year, they had to do it during the 5-year review period. And the Lake Management Planning Board does not.
Well, the largest growth sector is at 0 to 30%, and that's going to be entirely subsidized. Nobody's going to build 0 to 30% for profit. I don't, even what one of the RPFs are offering with 3 units for 3 household families for 9 people, they're not making a profit off that. It's like, here, we're basically giving this to the community to be able to do this. So, and that's at 60%. So if we go 30%, that's our largest band of 650 homes we have to figure out our units. That's all subsidized. And if the state is tightening up and they're asking the cities to find a way, what are we going to do? Tax the city? How do we do that? It doesn't seem like it's possible to accommodate a path forward in that aspect just by saying the land's available.
Well, I'd like to comment on that because it's been done.
Okay.
So that's what Seattle did. So what they did with their code for new development, if you're doing 6 units or higher, well, I want to say it was 8 units or higher, that a certain percentage had to be affordable housing based upon their analyzed calculations. So what a lot of developers did, they said, hey, guess what? I'm just going to give you the money, okay? You take it, because I still want to build to a market rate. I couldn't figure out, this is about a year ago, where Seattle's getting all that money to build all the affordable housing. That's one of the mechanisms that they use to allow the builders to do what? Where they opted out to say, hey, I'll just give you the money, and then yes, to build subsidized housing, as well as now having a lot of money to be able to do government-funded projects. So yeah, you have examples throughout Western Washington of what different communities have done. Seattle specifically has really tackled this problem pretty head-on and has some decent code of what they've used to accommodate a housing crisis that you can absolutely say the city is undergoing. Just looking at average prices in the city.
That's the construction excise tax you were talking about.
Yeah.
Both the construction excise tax idea and the affordable housing reserve fund would use the money pooled in the property law.
But that pushes that cost onto the home buyer that's not in that market, making it cost more for them, drawing them down into that market. And Seattle has some of the most expensive housing. They still have a housing crisis, and they're making it more expensive, aren't they, on the people that are actually buying units there, because they're saying, okay, for all these units, you'll have to give us this money or build it that way. And they're like, we'll just give you the money and charge more.
They put it on the
I don't know.
developers, but they did. They put it on the developers because it was their option. That if they weren't going to put in the number of that percentage of affordable units, they would just pay whatever that cap was to the city to go to a different fund. But the city is now building housing. But the city is building, owned by the city.
I'm just saying they're not taking a loss. They're not like, oh, well, we'll take this loss. They're getting that money from the building project, from the development project. So they're just.
The developers are getting density bonuses, so they would not normally be able to build to the density that they're building to. They're getting to build more because they're agreeing to build affordable housing, right, which is one of the tools in your toolbox. If you don't build affordable housing, you only get to build, say, 8 units, but if you build affordable housing, 4 units,
mean, they had the option though, but they didn't have to do that percentage of the unit, and they paid for that fund.
So it's encouraging density, is what it's encouraging, correct?
Mhm.
It's encouraging density by doing that.
And generating revenue for other affordable housing, so it's kind of, it's killing both birds with one stone, but you can't help but say that, I mean, obviously they are taking from the developer or the home buyer at that point, that's gonna buy those units, so I don't know if it's a win solution, but.
I had a question on the toolkits. I guess I'm a little confused. How do you determine, well, two questions. One, how do you determine which of these to use when? I mean, are they just all available all the time? And is it a living document? Conditions, circumstances change. Can you add to the toolkit?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what I made for Sedro-Woolley is kind of just based off of your data, like the underlying capacity of your current zoning, and then the tools that were identified. I think that something like this would have broad applicability. I think in order to make it work, you'd have to really all you would need is to have a sense of what the impact of something that you want to do might be, and I've got I kind of walked Tom and Nicole and city staff through it on how I put it together, but all you'd really need to know is if you came up with an idea that isn't modeled here and you wanted to model something new, you either look at an existing tool and change some of the numbers and see what it does, or you just make another copy of the underlying data with all the assumptions and come up with some new, oh, here's a new tool, what would it do? For example, I haven't modeled the construction excise tax or the reserve fund because it's not really, those aren't really tied to a specific place, and you'd have to get more specific to figure out where, what the parameters of it would be, and but you could add something like that to this and see what the impact would be. And I think you will have to do that eventually, because in order to show, like Nikki was saying, in order to show your work to the state and anybody who wanted to sue, that no, we've actually done our homework and we're actually taking these steps that are targeting these specific income bands, et cetera, you're gonna have to show that you've got there's something there other than just hopes and dreams. So you can certainly add to it. You just have to know, here's a change, here's a potential idea, what would the impacts of that look like? And it's all, I mean, a lot of this is it's theoretical because nothing's actually been built yet, right? That's where a lot of this is it's a little bit academic, because we're looking at this and we're going, okay, here's all these numbers, how do we kind of change some of the numbers to make it make sense, So it's a bit of an intellectual exercise, but it's important because the ultimate goal here is to get something that's going to stand up to appeal, and that's really what we're focused on.
I do have a question. So are we able to forward this worksheet to our planning commission members and city council members and let them experiment with it, play with it at home?
For sure.
Okay. That's one question. And then, yeah, go ahead.
So I was looking at this and comparing it to Google Maps and what would realistically change in the near future. I'm seeing, I'm never a big fan of rezoning to R15, but that's already a neighborhood. You're tearing down something if you actually want to build R15 there, so it's theoretical. The only place I see green space is the R7 that would go in north of John Liner. That would be likely, I'm just making a presumption off what I see in the map, to be developed in the near future. What would be the impact if we did the rezone to CBD on option 5 for the property owners there? Because those are all houses for the most part. If they want to do a remodel, if they want to do an addition, or just continue to use it as a home, will that be any negative impact to them with that change?
It's an interesting question. Potentially. I mean, I think one of the things that you can't necessarily model very easily in a tool like this, just in thinking about some of these changes, is how the change will change people's underlying calculation about what to do with their property, because a lot of that is so unique to the individual, right? Like, you know, if you went from R7 to R15, you might get more people on slightly larger lots who say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna subdivide and put up some townhomes or something. If you went to CBD, you might get fewer people willing to make the change because there might be like a historical change, but the people who do choose might be able to have a much bigger, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna just sell my property and somebody's gonna build a 4-story building here, right? So the magnitude of change on any one parcel is much bigger, but there might be more people who have trouble with some of the rules that accompany that, so it might not have the same breadth of change. So this is why some of this stuff is hard to model, because it's just like people's individual choices and what they do with their property, right? And it's hard to predict that. I mean, Commissioner Fatizzi would probably know more about that than anybody in this room, but that's one of the challenges that we faced. I think, you know, when you look at some of these rezones in the tool, since it's based on the underlying land capacity analysis, which is based off of basically, is it vacant or is it big enough to be subdivided? The actual number of units created in any one of those rezone areas is even theoretically not really even that big, because there aren't, except for the couple of big vacant properties north of John Liner that you noted that are currently R5, and those would likely be potentially a PRD situation because they're bigger properties. For the most part, you're looking at, you know, vacant parcels here and there, but it's a lot of, you know, a parcel that could be subdivided potentially if the zoning changed. Like currently, it wouldn't really make sense, but it might make sense if the zoning changed. So, there aren't very many of those, right? So you look at some of those on the tool, you click one of those rezones, and you see like, oh, we get like 9 units or something, and like that's helpful, but like on its own, it doesn't really help you all that much with the whole bigger picture. That's why, you know, you kind of look at stuff taken together. Like, what if we do a rezone and we provide a density incentive and we do the unilot subdivision code, and that's where you start adding stuff on, and then you go, okay, then we've kind of hitting this from multiple directions, and that can really move the market more than just rezone, because just rezoning, you know, if it's so individual site specific, you're not going to get a ton of change overnight. So it's a good question.
Thank you.
I did wanted to add to that, to your question is, they could choose to have their properties rezoned. They could choose to just continue living on it for the next 30, 40 years and do nothing. Though stuff can come in and do improvements to their project, they won't be required to change. But they might notice over time their neighborhood changing, right? Because some of their neighbors might choose to sell their property to a developer who will do a different kind of project, you know, mixed-use project, for example.
Yeah, I was more concerned just looking at, we have a lot of classic homes in that area that you were thinking for CBD. And so I just wanted to make sure if they needed to do like a real solid remodel to get that place back up to being a quality home, that it's not going to impair their ability to do it.
No.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
No,
Yeah.
the CPD has very specific design guidelines as well. And if we're looking at this as a potential option to accommodate GMA requirements, you know, we have infrastructure requirements as well. So it affects our capital facilities budgeting, where the actual services are going to be deployed. I mean, water lines, sewer, you know, surface water. There's a whole lot of bigger impacts and more physical. I mean, we could put all kinds of things on paper saying that, hey, you can do this, that, and the other thing by zoning. Here's a classic example. So we have an EPRD density 3 acres or higher. Now, let me bring this up. So you can have a 5-acre parcel that's a quarter of a mile away from a water line to be able to do that density. So even though we put this stuff on paper and it models out as far as the number of units, do we have the infrastructure in place to actually do it in the places we're identifying? That's something that's real. That's the physical, tangible things that make all this stuff happen. And I'm just throwing that out there. These are all good ideas, but there's more practical kind of things that are just as part of this discussion as anything else. And
going in and being paid for by the new development, right? So you pay, to upgrade the streets that are failing, or you pay to, your share of the sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, and stormwater infrastructure, and you put in that infrastructure as you develop. That is how the PMA is supposed to work. So the road management plan board wouldn't be swayed by an argument that we don't have the infrastructure, because the infrastructure is supposed to come in with the development and be funded by the development.
Yeah.
To answer your question about deadline, it was December first, well, it still is December 31st. And my hope, and we were talking to Charlie about this, and we hope that we can get our CUP determination out by November 1st. And it's a 60-day process, of course, it's going to be next year. But the idea is to get it done as soon as possible before the grant applications start getting announced and opened up.
Right, but I was asking about what our hard target for unit numbers was, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, so we don't get in trouble, right? With Mercer Island and, Kitsap County got in trouble.
Yeah, if we have the spreadsheet, we can. I know that the 0 to 30% is 741 units. That's the only one I remember off the top of my head. It's huge. I mean, not without deep subsidy. Yeah, I mean, there would have to be funding resources beyond well beyond what the city could currently support to do that. That's where some of these other funding tools would have to come in. And you know, you're not wrong, and you're not alone in every small, even medium-sized city in the state is saying like, yeah, well, I mean, we can't do this. So that's why, you know, cities are having to get creative with their funding mechanisms, because there's no way under the current way that subsidized housing is funded to build that many units in a 20-year period. That's where some of this, your all's creative thinking is very important. But yeah, so the 0 to 30% number is 741. I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. I know that it's in the hundreds, all the way in those lower income brackets. The city you actually have a surplus because of your changes that you did in your last plan and your last round of zoning changes with your UVMU and your the PRD work that you all did. You actually have a surplus of moderate income household or housing types. So things like, you know, townhouses, duplexes, triplexes, stuff that you can build in a PRD other than single family detached, and your multifamily zones. So you're actually doing okay on capacity for moderate income households. It's those lower income ones that are the hardest to get, where you have a deficit.
So, if I understand, so if we show our work through this process, how good enough is good enough?
That's what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to be 741, or does it have to be approximately 700? How does that, what's that wiggle room?
Well, and that's a really good question, because I sat down with the developer and specifically asked a lot of these questions. If we were to do the multifamily tax exemption, if we were, like, looking at theoretically, if we were to do all that, if we were to waive, impact fees for the lowest income, if we were to do all that stuff, is it still affordable for you as a private developer to come in and create these homes in this grand scheme, in this design? Would you still do it? And the answer is no. That it was not feasible in the 0 to 30% from a business standpoint from them,
Mm-hmm.
even with the addition of these things, because they simply don't add up to what the costs are with them.
Mm-hmm.
Between the materials, between the labor, between, you know, all of the unknowns and markets that are continually moving. So we have a lot of those unknowns. We have markets that are not moving, that are up and down. We have housing markets that are unreasonable, in my opinion, but a lot of people in the communities. And I mean, just an honest conversation about how can we make that happen? What can we do? And even if we were to increase some stuff, we might
Mm.
So, and that's why I included that comment about how the, so it's gonna be about the market factors. So if, like you said, if we did, Nikki and Matt, if we did get lucky and have 20 units built somehow, some way, and we're still not at the target that we see that we should be, and then what happens? And that's a great unknown. I mean, probably can answer that, but I think that's where we're struggling with too, right? If we don't
Right.
get our
Even,
700.
like, even if we were to make all of the estimates, right, like, there's stuff up there that I think as a whole, it's been pretty, like, a pretty good consensus that a lot of people don't agree, and constituents don't agree, and we have probably a lot of people packed in here. Um, but even if we were to take the tools and put them in place, I don't even know that we could, it's still feasible. And so at what point, what do we have to show, like, what will satisfy that? This
Mhm.
741 is nowhere near reasonable, and we can't tell property owners that they have to do this with their property. We have no control over that.
Yep.
It's not our place to do that. It's their right, it's their property, and they can do with what they've been zoned for. We're coming into this, like, this thought process and this situation where there's a kind of no-win situation with what's being pushed down the line. It's like, we're trying to have these conversations, we're trying to do this stuff, and it's incredibly difficult.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
The reality is we're, the city is no longer.
It seems, if I can ask Madison, because you work with developers too, so, I had the same thought that Sarah had, that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And what North Star put on a symposium about housing is the homeless problem, right, by Greg Colburn. And he was talking about the overregulation, and the whole thing about this, like, hey, let's just do a share tax, to tax all the citizens, which brings them into that lower bracket, and then tax the developers, and then throw out more taxes from state taxes and grants. That doesn't solve the big deficit. So would a developer, just like Sarah was saying, go in and build? Right now we have a surplus, like John said, right? We have, according to table 11 in the comp plan, the draft that we were working from, we have right now 216 in our capacity, and the housing needs 1,909. So that's 107 in surplus. So any new development that goes on would have to fill that 851 deficit in the 80 to 0, and most of that, as we saw, is in that 30%. It's all subsidized. So how, as far as, like, from familiarity with developer, what do you see? What's your opinion on this?
Development costs are a very big budget killer. When we're in our feasibility stages, looking at cost from PSC, sewer line extensions, all of that stuff, that's all looked at. And then we move on to
was, you know, and it's the same thing that we're in raising a red flag. Seattle's got like a 3% or less than 3.5% racial vacancy rate. They have the highest homelessness, amongst the highest homelessness in the nation, and yet they have the highest GDP. And they're taking from developers to give to low-income state-funded projects, and yet they still have a homeless problem. We have more houses than we need in Sedro-Woolley per what they're asking for, but we don't have enough of the below 30 AMI, which is not going to happen without state funding. So this is a huge red flag, not just for our community, but for the state, that's been created and cannot be fixed by December. This housing, I mean, that's giant. That's 851 homes or 750 homes in the 30% below. So I mean, I don't know what these lawsuits are going to come to, or what some of these places are looking future-wise is looking to do. I read through their website and see what their goals are, but it's just not possible in many of our smaller communities, and it'll drive development, which will drive the cost of housing up. So if somebody loses their job, they will either be homeless or need to move, and if they move, then it's cost of moving for them as well. So there's a high likelihood they're going to either cram in with relatives, which might not happen, or be homeless.
I just want to say it's a little after 8, if there's no objection, we'll just continue on until we complete what we're doing here. Okay. And I see Joe Patisi has had his hand up for a while.
I just want to say one final thing. We have the capacity now to handle our work projections. The challenge is different income bands, but I just don't see how that actually can balance itself out to say, well, on this side of the street, the 0 to whatever percent's going to go here. That's where it goes. We have plenty of capacity to handle what our projections are. How do you control the costs and tell a developer or anybody to say, hey, this is what you have to put in here per what the state is saying? Anyway, it's going to be a good discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Vicki, I'm sorry.
Can I just throw something out there? If we are all sort of the mindset that we can't get to the 0 to 30% units without subsidies,
Even with
one
subsidies.
one idea might be, you know, it is permissible to utilize city property for affordable housing purposes. So one idea might be to consider putting in your comp plan, hey, we'll buy some property that we will zone high density residential, and then we will work in the next 5 years to partner with a low income housing provider who can then go after the grants to build and manage the low income housing project. That might be something to consider in addition to density bonuses. And to me, it seems like density bonuses are probably the most logical way to get to the 0 to 30. But just an idea. We can utilize city property for affordable housing, and that might be a way to push this down the road a bit.
There is some, I'm sorry, language in there already about working with low-income providers, and we could work with that to make it a little more specific. We already talked about any properties that you already have in the city that you're not using that could potentially be donated to a Habitat for Humanity, for example, and they could do the building. I completely agree. It has to be subsidized. The land has to be covered. You know, if you take the cost of land out of a project, that helps a lot, but it's still, you know, as we're hearing tonight, it's very expensive to build. So it has to kind of come from a whole bunch of different directions in order to make it happen, and I think that's what they're doing in Seattle too. But
We'd have to plan for like 37 homes every year in low income to be built to meet this goal. And that we just, the city doesn't have that much property to donate, or if they were straight up units. I don't know that the state has the funding. We just raised taxes the highest we've ever done, and then we're looking at what they're projecting as $1 billion shortfall from state costs and tariffs and stuff like that. So they're already looking like, how do we even fund what we have? So yeah, it's just, that's a strange one, because that's, think about it, 37 homes a year for the next 20 years to meet 750 homes per unit.
Well, we have to do it. I mean, we have to do it. So what are the next steps here, guys?
we can just come back and got our plan, anything that doesn't need to be in there, just, you know, I mean, obviously, the consensus, what, I've heard from several council members is anything that doesn't need to be in our comp plan as a whole, that's not a state requirement, probably shouldn't be in there. But it kind of feels like this housing element is counterproductive to almost every other element that we have, economic development, everything. So, I just wanted to know if we were able to amend our comp plan, and if we did, who would we send it to? Would we send it back to the state and say, hey, here's our amended plan, or would we just keep it ourselves?
No, they would review whatever amendments would be, recommended for approval.
Well, the truth is, we're probably not alone. There's
Right.
probably going to be other cities.
Every other city.
Can't we join together then and say, this is not gonna work, here are our lawyers, will fight for us?
Because not everybody believes that. Every city's different.
There's a lot of like-minded cities.
They'll find out.
I think what we need to do is to continue, but my suggestion is that we continue down this path, work with this toolbox, and send this out to you guys too. You guys experiment, see about it. Get your comments back to me as a goal. We'll send that off to FAST, and we'll table that for planning commission at the October 21st meeting. Some of the stuff may fly, some other new ideas may come up. I think that's where we're at.
Thomas, may I also make a suggestion along with that? If we can reach out to Representative Bislick, Representative Lowe, and Senator Wagner and find out if they're finding any cities that they're representing in their districts, and see if there is a coalition. I mean, even if there's, 3 cities or 10 cities that they know of that are in our shoes, could we all band together to write a letter back to the board and say, listen, what you're asking for is unrealistic?
They don't vote for this stuff. They voted for this GMA Act, so.
Well, they may have voted for the GMA Act, but now that they're seeing that actual what's happening in our community, would they hear from us? So, I mean, it doesn't hurt for us to at least reach out to them to ask them, like, hey, are you hearing any of the cities? They represent all people's points.
And I don't know if we'll do it, but we can do both things.
Yeah.
To be doing this and to be
Well, I'm not opposed to reaching out, I'm just saying,
I know.
they voted for it.
I know.
All right.
So, Councilmember Hudson brought up a good point about how it could impact the economic portion of it. Have we discussed that? Has that been a discussion at all in regards to ours? Because it's like the 1590 funds that comes out of sales tax revenue, when we've got a really big push to create low income, 0 to 30%, there's not a lot of excess revenue. We would hope that we would be able to have or create jobs around here that would provide them the opportunity to work through that and up and, and create a life cycle of housing for everybody, and provide them opportunities. But I'm really hoping that we wouldn't be looking at taking away from, or rezoning any industrial or commercial, because we have very limited bits of that, and we need to utilize that so we can create opportunity for our community.
Yeah, I think those are good points. Note on the commercial and industrial, we can't take that away, but to your point, your skill point, we can take away our economic development through that filter and see what might shake out.
There may be some additional kind of like jobs, housing balance, and workforce housing type stuff that we can look at. I think the
We've heard before that we like to have folks working here and living.
yep, and jobs, housing balance is also an element of looking at the housing element as well as part of the housing element requirements. So there is a connection there. Yeah.
And the more I think about it, I think about the fact.
Well, that brings to mind Northern State,
Mhm.
you're gonna have housing up there. The point of the Swift Center is jobs,
Mhm.
economic development, that should be the priority. And if housing is part of it, maybe it co-lives with it, but it should be jobs and economic development.
Yeah, because you are relying to a good extent on the Swift Center to show that you have capacity for projected economic growth. So you wouldn't want to do anything to take away from that.
Think about like the incubator project that's happening now, and folks that are just starting out. This is more like letting them have to go buy a house, but provide housing so when you're there, they're wanting to work there.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps living in an apartment or shared house, whatever the thing is, especially for the
Even restaurants that can't afford to stay open, they have bought a truck and they're actually doing their business out of the truck. So people are getting creative as far as.
as long as they have a permit.
So Matt, I wanna thank you for this,
Thank you.
toolkit.
You're welcome.
I think that it's actually going to be our way of achieving what the state is asking us to do. And I appreciate the fact that you suggest, Tom, that we all take a look at it and have it emailed to us and have a chance to experiment, get a feel for it. Maybe even gain a better understanding of what it is that we need to be doing, what we need to be looking at. So if there are no objections, why don't we move forward? Is everybody comfortable with moving forward with that?
Th-
What I'd like to do is put a little cheat sheet together for you guys with instructions on how to use the spreadsheet, as well as little summary points on what all of the ideas are that are on that. I recognize that they are kind of short-handed,
Mhm.
so I'd like to put something together just to give you guys, have a good understanding of what you're
If I understand correctly, that doesn't include any of the assistance or subsidies, encouragement into that. So, the shared tax program or the, build 2, 3 units or build 4 units at regular, build 2 units that are portable, and you end up building up. So that doesn't include any of that.
So it does include, so the stuff that was kind of location specific, so like the idea that was in the original draft of the plan that you've already seen I think there was a policy that directed the city to come up with like a density bonus program essentially for the PRDs. So I did model that so that a certain percentage of the units created through PRDs would likely be in the 50 to, I can't remember whether it was 30, 50 or 50 to 80 percent AMI bucket. So that's included, but the kind of straight funding thing, like the reserve fund and the excise tax, I did not include because those are more, it would, any project, any construction project that wasn't exempt would pay it, and then it would go into a pot of money, and then, so it's kind of hard to model. Yeah, so that's not included, but the location-specific stuff like the MFTE or the density bonus program, those are tied to specific zones or sites.
I appreciate what you're saying, and it puts me in mind actually of what Becky from Helping Hands Food Bank is saying. So they just get very creative. There's things that need to be done, there's people that need to be taken care of, needed to be helped, and they get creative with what's out there. So I appreciate the fact that you're actually talking about some of the things that we could be looking at as well. This is really painful. It's painful for me. I am not on board with a lot of this, but I do clearly understand that housing is an issue and we do need to get people housed. So this is an opportunity, I guess, for us to really examine how we want to go about doing that, making a difference, actually making a difference with our family, friends, and neighbors.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, with that, then, yes, Matt, yes.
When do you need this?
Let's see the passage.
Before the October meeting.
Before the October meeting, October 21st is when we're meeting. Anytime before that, any questions, meeting us.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out with any questions. Don't
Great, how's that? Okay, my name is Nora Peterson. I'm a resident of Sedro-Woolley, and I'm running in the Ward 3 City Council race. I'll keep this short, great discussion today. I recently had a community member reach out to me about the risk of dam failure, asking me my opinion. I used to work in emergency management, and he was like, well, what, from an emergency management perspective, what are your thoughts on this? And I immediately thought about hazard mitigation planning. And so I reached out to the city and I got a copy of the draft hazard mitigation plan. This is actually the #1 priority in the plan, so I was really happy to see that. The purpose of hazard mitigation planning in my mind is to position the city to build the partnerships and gather the resources needed to make these projects happen. So I just wanted to come and share this with the council because moving forward, as you finalize and then implement this plan, I just want to ask that you provide strong leadership on this initiative in particular because it's so important here in Sedro-Woolley. We act as kind of like a bottleneck with all of the jurisdictions in the eastern part of the county. Everything needs to flow through our city, so we're really in a good position to take a leadership position on this. The county is the lead agency, but you know, from our perspective in Sedro-Woolley, we need to make sure that we're getting the results that work for our city. And I also, the other thing I thought about was the city has a cybersecurity grant. I haven't had a chance to look at that yet. I believe it's funded through CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This is a relatively new agency, and a lot of these awards come with a requirement for a committee and a plan as well. And because this is such an important piece of infrastructure here locally, it'd be good to see that included there. And those plans are more focused on not natural disasters, but you know, terrorism, cyber threats, and man-made disasters. So that's all.